Here are 10 tips to win more in World Arena. Learn to counter the most meta units before the match begins. In every season, there is a handful of units that are just used all the time in most matches. Make sure you have counters to those units before the match begins. If your opponent picks Oliver, have a counter ready for that, like a Douglas or a Sillin. If your opponent picks more, maybe have a thick Carbine brewed up and ready to go. In every season, there is a meta of most popular units and a handful of units that are strong against them. If you get good at countering the most popular units, half the work is already done. Max your runes and gem and grind them as much as possible. You know there's always those matches where you or your opponent have a unit that's barely alive with a sliver of health. Those extra few percentage in gems and grinds can make the difference between winning and losing. The difference between a hero and legendary grind can be about 3%. Take into consideration those stats on HP, attack, and defense across 6 runes, and just increasing your grind efficiency can give your units 18% more HP, 18% more defense, and 18% more attack with the exact same runes. Max your unit's skills. If you're early game, that extra damage on Praha skill 1 really won't give you too much value, but if you're trying to push for higher ranks in World Arena, that little extra damage will add up over the long term. Telegraph less. The great Bruce Lee once said, something, look, I kick your face. Or maybe he said something about telegraphing your intent to your opponent. When your opponent doesn't know what's coming, they won't know how to prepare for it, and you'll have the upper hand. Know the value of surprising your opponents. If you draft all meta units, they'll be conditioned to know how to fight you. But the more you draft things that they aren't expecting, the more they'll have to think and likely be unprepared. If your first 2 picks are Chilling and Tisarion or Jogun and Ajir, it will take your opponent a little extra time to figure out your strategy, which can be stressful for them and give you the upper hand. This works especially well if you have some rare LD5 units that people aren't expecting. Understand speed tick thresholds. See, there are certain thresholds to unit speeds that will give you a bigger benefit to overcoming, especially in longer games. This is based on how attack bar is calculated and how units can overfill their attack gauges, so it's beneficial to understand how that works and how it's coded. There's a link in the description if you'd like to learn more. Apply logic to your artifacts. Artifacts can give you that little added boost in many ways. If you find yourself in a situation where your Masha is getting attacked by Miles and Praha often, you might want to make sure her artifacts have damage reduction from water units. If your Molly keeps getting obliterated by Douglas, give her some decreased damage from wind, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Make sure your artifacts make sense to where you are using the unit. If you can't outspeed, make sure that you can survive. If your opponent is playing a cleave team, make sure you have enough tankiness, HP lead, shield runes, and damage mitigation to take that damage, heal up, and then retaliate. If your opponent is playing a control team, bring units that steal turns. See, not every unit needs a natural turn to do things, especially when units like Oliver, Shungpung, and Vertihealer are around. You can cut with things like Amduat, Zhao, Susano, Antares, or you can just counter nonstop with Xingje, Sillin, Laika, and Douglas. Just do more matches. There's a big misconception that high-level players have 90% win rates or something ridiculous. That is so far from reality, even for the most expensive whale accounts. 50% win rate is average. If you have a 55% win rate consistently, you will keep climbing until you hit equilibrium. Just do more matches. The added benefit to that is even if you lose some, sometimes you'll learn things and it'll make you a better player. In the end, these tips still can't fix luck, and sometimes you'll lose just by being unlucky, but if you use these tips as much as you can, you'll see your win rate slowly increase and World Arena becomes slightly less stressful.